Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the session where we're going to talk about one of the most fundamental binding constraints when we're talking about unlocking Indonesia's potential, namely human development and talent management in that regards. My name is Utami. It's my honor that Think Policy is a knowledge partner with IBC in hosting this particular session. And in the next hour, we're going to be listening from very rich perspectives covering from education practitioner, academia's perspective, of course, most importantly, the business sector perspective, as well as from LinkedIn in terms of the overall trend of skills, need, and gap. So I'd like to divide the conversation today into two parts. First, we'll talk about the fundamentals. What are some of the most fundamental gaps in talent management in Indonesia and beyond? But also secondly, I think specific challenges that each of the sector that I mentioned earlier are going through and needs to address, and in order to for Indonesia to unlock its potential. So without further ado, I would like to invite our four distinguished speakers, each again representing the particular sector. Let me just move to that side. First of all, I need to apologize because our first speaker, the Vice Minister, Professor Stella Christie, couldn't make it, unfortunately, today. But I'm sure that we're going to have a rich conversation with the four other speakers. I would like to first invite Ibu Itje Chodidjah to the stage. They have names, Ibu, for where you're supposed to be sitting, I think over here. Right here. Ibu Itje has over 40 years of experience as an education practitioner. She holds a PhD in education, and until 24, I think she was the director or president of the, until 25, of the Indonesian Commission in UNESCO. So she also specializes in teacher development, which we will cover a lot today, and also has a lot of strong interest in culture and environment. Very pleased to have you, Ibu Itje, here this morning. The second speaker, actually, let me move to that side now because now there are names of the speakers. The second one that I would like to invite to the front is Professor Matthew Nicholson from Monash University. Welcome, Matthew. He's the Vice-Chancellor and President of Monash University, previously also serving in Monash University of Malaysia, and has years and years of experience, not only in research, but also teaching and university administration. So I think that's a complete set of experience that we'd like to learn more from. Next, to represent the business sector perspective, we have, I'm very excited about this next speaker, Ibu Arini Subianto, from a member of IBC. Welcome, Ibu. She's the President Director of Persada Capital, as well as a commissioner in a few companies across different sectors, which attests to her ability in navigating different sectors. And we'll learn more about the industry perspective in the case of talent management from her. And then finally, last but definitely not least, we have Dave, the VP of Legal and Public Policy from LinkedIn. Please join me in welcoming Dave. And I think we will definitely have a lot to learn from LinkedIn's experience and studies in seeing how where things are right now with all the uncertainties. So we've kind of started our conversation earlier at the restaurant, which could be kind of its own talk, but let's dive right in. So I'll start with the most fundamental question. I think entering 2025, there are many different dynamics and changes, mega trends that are happening globally, not just in Indonesia. We're talking about technological disruptions, AI, definitely that fundamentally changed the way that education will be delivered, could be delivered, or what's possible. we're talking about environmental crisis as well, and the need for industries to change and the talent needs there, geopolitical tensions as well, and economic volatility. So many different things are changing, and the industries are affected, Bu Arini, and by that definition, also the talents need to adapt. Educational institutions need to quickly adapt to those needs. So my first fundamental question to all the speakers are, then what are some of the leverage points through which these changes will be affecting how we develop human capital or our talents? I'd like to start from Bu Arini, actually, if I may. How do you see all these mega trends will be affecting the needs for talent in Indonesia and beyond? Please, Bu.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for the opportunity to actually participate in this discussion. We all actually in the middle of the ever-changing technology movement, improvement, innovation, and everything. So it's really hard to pinpoint which particular skill set that everybody has to have, and especially for Indonesia that is still developing with very uneven education opportunities throughout our archipelago. So, but as a business player, what is lacking, and it's quite obvious, is that the ability or capability to solve problems with logical approach. So with that in mind, hopefully with the very fast changing innovation, technology and whatnot, and the changing business environment, the talent can easily adapt to these changes, because we don't know what's going to be needed 10 years from now, 20 years from now. We know that we're going to be going into a more greener environment, hopefully, and also with the technology enabling business process, we really need people or talents that can easily learn this new skill set. That's from my point of view.
And do you think that has been the case, or how big is the gap from what you imagine as the need?
For Indonesia alone, the gap is huge. The gap is really huge. So we really need a collaboration from the private sector as well as the government, because government cannot do this alone. We need private sectors to actually go down and help and contribute from all levels, not just higher education, but all the way from early learning years, all the way to higher education, because we are still going to need farmers 10 years from now, 20 years from now. We need people who can adjust to like future manufacturing, future farming, future everything. So that skill set and introduction of higher order thinking should start from early on.
I think very spot on. Higher order thinking, problem solving skills. Dave, how do you see the trends in terms of the need for upskilling, and as particularly related to the higher order thinking?
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Afu, for the question. Let me first start out with a couple trends we're seeing on the LinkedIn platform. And for those of you less familiar with LinkedIn, LinkedIn has over 1.1 billion members globally, about 325 million members in the Asia-Pacific region, about 32 million alone in Indonesia. And it is a place where people come online to find jobs, learn new skills, and to forge professional relationships. And so on our platform at massive scale, the interaction between all these members generates a pretty incredible data set that we can then analyze to glean labor market insights and trends. And one of the biggest trends we're seeing is the pace at which skills for jobs are changing. So our research shows that for any given job, since 2016, the skills required to do that job have changed 40%. And then we project that by 2030, with the widespread adoption of AI, generative AI, the skill sets for that same job are going to change 70%. So we're talking about massive shift here in how we need to approach the labor market. And look, I think that there are a number of ways to address this rapid change And one of them is I think that the mindset about the talent ecosystem needs to shift more towards a skills-first talent ecosystem. And maybe I can sort of give an example of how going towards skills first can be beneficial. So everybody knows that digital talent is in high demand right now. We recently published a labor market insights report called Jobs on the Rise 2025. And in that, we showed even in Indonesia, there are two jobs in particular. One is a cybersecurity engineer. Another is a building information modeling engineer. I don't even know what that is. But anyway, these jobs really weren't around even a few years ago. And so if employers are out there looking to fill these jobs and they use sort of the traditional qualifications of the right 4-year degree or past experience with that same job title, the pool is going to be really small and they're going to have a really tough time. So instead, what LinkedIn advocates for is more of a skills-first approach where you look at what are the skills required to do the job, and then you look at candidates by what skills do they have and do they match. And if you do that, if you look at skills as opposed to just looking at sort of those traditional qualifications, our research shows that you increase the talent pool 9 times. And that's better for everybody. It sort of democratizes opportunities for people looking for jobs, the job seekers. It shortens the hiring cycle, and that's, of course, better for the economy sort of writ large. So just one idea on how to sort of a leverage point there.
That is fascinating, and I think it helps really put the evidence in terms of the numbers. I think like some of the statistics that you've mentioned, particularly looking at the trends that you can see from LinkedIn, I think it is really showing how evident it is that the change is happening. But at the same time, Dave, I was wondering, because yes, there has been a technological boom in terms of the needs for digital talents, and now there is AI. But hasn't there been a tech winter across, like in Indonesia and globally? Does that change the demand for tech-related jobs, or how do you see this?
Yeah, so it's interesting because we recently published another report. It's called Harnessing AI, Transforming Southeast Asia's Workforce. And so, of course, that specifically looked at Southeast Asia and looked at Indonesia in particular. And there's still this incredible demand for digital skills, and I think a lot of the reason is that technology can be dispersed because it's all interconnected over the internet, and it's bits and bytes and those types of things. So I think that there are opportunities even in Indonesia, even in remote places, provided the infrastructure is there, for these types of jobs to flourish. So I think there is opportunity for Indonesia. But of course, policymakers and academia and industry will need to collaborate better to ensure that those opportunities are there.
Yeah, thank you. Ibu Itje, I want to link back to what Bu Arini earlier said about higher order thinking and problem-solving skills, and the fact that the gap is still very huge in Indonesia. So where do you think we can fix that? Where should we start?
Well, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Well, critical thinking cannot be just built overnight. And let me highlight, looking at the gap between the demand now, the statistics that Dave was explaining, and Ibu Arini was talking about the gap. Let me focus now on early education, primary and secondary education. Because up to today, our students' level of literacy and numeracy, well, if we look at just one single reference PISA assessment, we are still relatively low. And if literacy is low, then the next level will be so challenging. So let me look at least 3 important aspects that should be taken into serious consideration. I look at my note. It's because when I'm talking about education, I can go very broad. So I focus on what I have. So number 1, the 3 aspects that is very important for the government and the private sector to look at is the sustainability and consistency of education policy. Changes should not be simply done because of the change of the leadership. Changes in education policy should be sustainable and dive deeper into the implementation of the existing policy. So that this is to guarantee that the development of creativity, critical thinking will continue along the life of the students. So, and then focus also on how the existing policy has been implemented, and then evaluate, and then improve for better practice. It's essential to ensure that the changes implemented are grounded in the existing policy and to prevent unnecessary disruption, unnecessary chaos at the grassroots level. And number 2 is investing more in teacher development. In enhancing education quality, after more than 4 decades in education sector, I believe that investing in teacher development is crucial to improve education quality and, more importantly, to guarantee equality and equity. Because if the teachers are qualified, then of course they can go to the students. Teachers require competency enhancement because they play vital role. And then by enhancing teachers' competencies, we can empower the students to provide quality teaching and learning process. This is what needs to be done continuously and consistently by the government as well as the private sector. And then also harnessing technology to help to streamline the administrative task, because so far teachers' time are occupied for doing administrative things, and these are considered to be more important because it relates directly to the incentive that they're going to receive instead of the quality of the teaching and learning process. And number 3 is the importance of strengthening collaboration between central government, local government, and more importantly is public-private partnership that will play a crucial role in expanding the enhancement of the quality of our current and future workforce. And I'm confident that their impact will be so wide. So far, there has been some collaboration, especially in vocational sector. But that's not enough. That's not enough. Mentorship program for teachers and lecturers in university is also important, because this is to open up their perspective that the life in the school and the life in campus should be connected to the real life, to the real needs of industrial life and other professional life. So, and then the public-private partnership can also tap into the providing resources, providing digital support for teachers and of course for students. But I focus more on teachers because teachers are those who help the students to develop.
Good, I think. Excellent points, Itje. I think that part where you mentioned about the need to ground education in the realities of industry and real life, we can get back to that point later, maybe through Ibu Arini, hopefully. But I also want to underline what you mentioned about continuity and in terms of how we make sure that good policies can continue while allowing for, again, a feedback loop and like constant innovation in the education sector, which is a challenge. But finally, as I want to move to Matthew after this, I think the issue of teacher development is definitely like remains a challenge, and I want to dive deeper there. But before, I want to go to Matthew first and maybe talk a bit about the same issue of teacher or like teaching staff development from a higher education perspective. How do you see teachers, in this case, professors, right, academia, what are some of the most fundamental challenges for higher education in responding to the changes, the rapidly changing space right now?
I'd like to acknowledge that I've been in Indonesia for a year. And so my experience of the Indonesian higher education system is more limited than many of the people in the audience. But in the partnerships that Monash has developed since we've been here in Indonesia, particularly with the 10 private universities that we've partnered with recently, there is a skills gap in academia. The data suggests that 15% of academics in Indonesian universities are PhD qualified. I think the people in this room would acknowledge that there's tiers of universities, from the public universities, the very high-ranked public universities that maybe have 65, 70% PhD qualified, down to some of the smaller private universities that only have a handful of PhD qualified staff. In a system that becomes deregulated really quickly, and there are now 4,500 higher education institutions in Indonesia, there are going to be skill gaps in the workforce, the university workforce. So we've talked about Indonesia's workforce, but higher education has a workforce of its own that needs to be taken care of, that needs to be nurtured. I've been in universities for not as long as Ibu here with a 40-year career, but mine is a 30-year career in universities. And I've always loved visiting universities. I don't know if any of you have done that in places like the UK and America and other countries, but you see universities are often walled off from the communities that they are part of. Sometimes there's a moat or a river around them, there's roads, there's gates, and the charge of being the ivory tower, unfortunately for many, many years, that was accurate for universities. The challenge for universities and the challenge to meet many of those things that were introduced to us, climate change, energy transition, digital economy, skills development, rely on universities to become permeable. The notion of having either no or a very fluid barrier between the university and industry, and the university and the communities that they are part of. And that is the challenge, and the challenge that I would put out to universities, but also to government policy, is that we need to incentivise the permeability of universities. The connection to industry is absolutely first and foremost amongst that. And this goes back to Dave's point about skills first, that it was a challenge in part to me, that qualifications perhaps have become less important than skills. I would perhaps argue differently, Dave, and you would expect me to from a university. But I think in order to take a skills-first approach and have universities be permeable, we need to incentivise their connection to industry. We've at Monash established industry advisory boards for all of our master's programs. Our PhD programs seek to partner with university and often have supervisors inside industry organisations who are PhD qualified and can supervise. At our campus back in Australia, which is the largest in Australia, Moderna has just built its first production facility in the Southern Hemisphere on our campus. We have the first heart hospital in Australia built on the campus. These are things that can happen in Indonesia if the government incentivises what I'm calling the permeability of universities.
I want to take a pause in that topic and dive a bit deeper, right? The permeability of university or higher education system with the industry and how that can be enabled. I think some of the examples on how Monash University has been trying to do it is inspiring, can definitely be like replicable or like taking lessons learned out of that. The Industry Advisory Board is an interesting approach, as well as other examples. Ibu Arini, what do you think in terms of the expectations from the industry sector? We heard from the higher education. Now, from the industry sector, how do you see higher education institutions, universities can engage better with with the industry, because there are some trends where industries ended up building their own university. It's also a thing, right? Like we see some business, including state-owned businesses, having their own universities, for example. Do you see that this is the right approach, or we go back to what Matthew said in terms of permeating into existing universities?
Thank you. So I actually really agree with what the panels have mentioned, Dave, Itje, Matthew, because I think it's really important for the industry to go and collaborate deeper with education institution. So what industry is expecting is, I mean, there are a lot of initiatives, that's for sure. A lot of companies are actually using their CSR hands to collaborate with local education institution. So this, unfortunately, is very sporadic because usually they operate with, they go into institutions that are located within the same area where they operate. And because of the sporadic nature of it, it's not a consolidated effort. Whereas what we need right now is it's both ways, not just as industry players to give mentoring, because right now I think so far that's the capability that exists, give mentoring to students and to universities. But we're actually hoping that we could advise the education system or the government on how to shape the curriculum. Because right now, what we're facing is a very one-way approach to education, where creative thinking, active participation in classroom is not encouraged, where that has been a very, very deep-rooted issues that basically hindered the creation of higher order thinking. So what we expect is some sort of push and maybe an opening in the government that could allow this push in the academia level. So they're, instead of being defensive or very textbook, but to open up and actually see what's needed is the basic, behind all other skills, are this logical approach to problem solving, and especially in higher education. So I can talk long and more about this, but I would like to hear, as Itje had mentioned, we could actually sit in that table for hours just discussing this. But yeah, allowing the permeability, giving incentive, and more flexible incentive, because right now it's very segregated, it's very narrow, and it's quite particular of what kind of incentive that companies can get if they I guess, support education.
Yeah, and I think when we talk about permeability of university and interconnectedness with the industry, there's also two layers to it, right, Arini? Because there is the curriculum themselves, so like it's the talent match, the ensuring the right skill sets, but the second part is actually research. And like university or higher education institutions as the centers for research, and how maybe we can better maybe align research topics or like outcomes to better fulfill the expectation or the needs of the industry. How do you see that need?
Yes, completely agree with that. So we are lacking in our education system, we are lacking R&D facilities. I mean, our R&D, even in one of the, what we feel as our Ivy League of Indonesia, is quite in a very, I guess, sad condition. So right now, what the industry has been doing is donating not just financial support, but also machinery or whatever that's needed by the university. But I think to get a quick win, because right now we're trying to catch up with the movement of technology and the changing in business environment, we need to actually open up our doors as industry players for college students or higher education students to be able to access and use the facility for their R&D. It's actually a win-win situation. For instance, I was in a discussion with one of the plantation company that if we could actually expand the facility and allow higher, like agriculture students to participate in the R&D. Not only that it would benefit the company, but it also benefit for future farming. So that is the mindset that we have to introduce or encourage business people to think about. Because once we have this in place, if every industry is participating and opening up their door and providing R&D facility, we don't have to talk about state-of-the-art facility. Any facility will do, because at this very moment, we need that quick win situation. Everybody could become a good fisherman, a good farmer, a good digital whatever, from creative to a more particular skill. So we need that. So that's basically what I would like government to encourage and to give incentive also for the industry players.
Yep. I'm glad you mentioned agriculture as an example of sector, because I want to move to Dave and talk about the sectors in particular. I know we started with technology or like digital skills as a sector, but definitely across other sectors, things are changing as well with the climate crisis. I think agricultural business needs to adapt. Many practices are also changing. ESG requirement, all of this. How do you see, has this trend also show up on LinkedIn? And I think my second part of the question is then, what is the role of LinkedIn in helping bridge this skill set and industry needs?
Right, so great questions. Before I get to those, I feel like I was challenged by Matthew and I need to respond to him. I'm kidding, of course. So Matthew, I promise you I'm not trying to put you and your colleagues out of a job. I think that there will always be need for four-year university degrees and graduate degrees and so on. I think, however, to enable a skills-based talent ecosystem to properly function, there also has to be, and this is probably where policymakers come in, there has to be support for more modular learning, more micro-credentialing, more opportunities for mid-career professionals who don't have the opportunity to take 4 years off and don't have the resources for the tuition to upskill and be agile enough so that their career path is resilient and so on. So yeah, we're good. Anyway, back to, in terms of the sector. So look, one thing that I can say about sectors is, as I understand Indonesia's economy, one of the largest sectors is manufacturing, and also retail and wholesale trade. But just to take manufacturing, for example, if I look at that, and then if I also look at some of the LinkedIn research that looks at sectors and the impact of AI in particular on sectors, our research shows that 65% of people in manufacturing roles will be impacted by Gen AI. Now, that'll be to differing degrees. Some of them will be very much disruptive and will need to find new roles. Others, it'll be they'll be able to use it as augmentation to be more productive. But so I think that countries like Indonesia should probably look at their biggest sectors where they have the largest number of workers, and then also look at where is the disruption going to be the most acute, and then focus sort of skilling intervention and skill training on that sort of Venn diagram overlap. So, yeah.
And yeah, the second part of the question, how do you see LinkedIn as a portal can help bridge this process, or even like beyond LinkedIn? What about the role of maybe certification mechanism, things like this, in closing that gap?
Yeah, so I'm going to give a little bit of a sales pitch here. So LinkedIn, of course, most people hopefully know, you can go on, you can create a profile. It's essentially like a CV. There's another product or another service on the platform, which is LinkedIn Learning. Over 23,000 courses on there. I believe there's over 800 on AI fluency and AI skills. And so I think LinkedIn is particularly helpful in identifying for workers, for industry, for everybody, where the skills gaps are, what skills are in demand, what jobs are in demand, and then matching that to learning paths, to coursework that can help close those gaps. And again, we're talking about a handful of courses over a number of hours. This isn't a long-term time investment, but that's at least a starting point to help workers be able to adapt to the rapid changes in the workforce.
So there you go, LinkedIn Learning. I think we definitely can talk more about that, but I want to move to Ibu Itje and talk about brain drain and basically talent pool. How do you see, so first with, I think Indonesia ranks 45th out of 63 countries in the global talent competitiveness index, which is pretty low. I mean, I know that we use the PISA score a lot to measure literacy and numeracy, but I think when we talk about talent competitiveness, that's a whole other like level of competitiveness that we need to also be looking at, which is pretty low. And so how do you see in terms of talent movements outside Indonesia, so moving into Indonesia and Indonesian talents moving out? What do you see in terms of, first of all, the trends, the overall trends? There is, I think, on social media lately, like all this kabur aja dulu, like Indonesians trying to find jobs outside. Do you think that this will cause some kind of brain drain? But at the same time, also, how do you see Indonesia in attracting like the right kind of talents and sustaining it in country?
Yes, I think we shouldn't look at this at the positive or negative end, because what is happening now is actually the result of many things. The result of the access to information, the result of the access to travel, the result of a lot of factors, and also because the world is borderless. Everybody knows about everybody's life in any other part of the world. So the focus is not about labeling whether, you know, this is good or bad, but the competition at the global level has opened our eyes that preparing human capital cannot be done overnight. Again, I repeat this statement because to prepare our workforce to be more agile and retain in our workplace, they have to be prepared. And we have to see ourselves as one of the global players too. We cannot say that this is in the country and this is outside the country. We have to prepare, we have to have the mindset that we prepare global players, whether they are going to stay in the country or going abroad. And therefore, we need to have a sort of a global accepted measurement tool, which help education sector, which help industry to give equal access to play in industry, whether it is in the country or in other countries. There is a tendency of having, you know, tools which develop in institutions. Okay, instead of using globally accepted tool, we just use our own tool. And then if those institutions use their own tool, then the limit, I mean, it limits our workforce to go to play role. In my experience, for example, I encounter lots of institutions prepare their English assessment by themselves, for example. Then, okay, they are happy because their English level of their students or is good, but it's not globally accepted. This is one example. So therefore, we need to prepare everyone to be able to play in the global market, not about preparing those who are going abroad or those who are going to stay in the country. And I want to add some point here that actually our young people want to be able to play in their in the workplace as it is expected by industry. But those who prepare should always continuously looking what is needed in the workplace.
Do you have any particular recommendation in terms of, like policy more broadly, in terms of this talent mobilization, or maybe even on LPDP, because I think that's one
Yes.
of the entry points as well where people like to take this discussion on.
Yes, yes. I think there is, this is when we look at the our workforce who can be successful in working at the global market, fulfilling global standard. Then, when they go back to the country, they actually want to have opportunity to have the same incentive. And they have a little bit better quality because they have been there. And then there is a gap with all those who retain in the country. And if we are talking about policy, then we need a policy to encompass not only competitive incentive, but also investment in skill development and capacity building. Currently, many Indonesian workers are equipped with better or global standard only when they are going to be sent abroad. But actually, those who stay here is the same. And then they often bring back enhanced skill and expertise, while those who are working in the country might not be prepared to compete with them at the end. So to reduce this gap, we need to implement policy or initiative that create equal opportunity for all workers and strike a balance between attracting and retaining the returning workers and fostering domestic workforce.
Thank you so much.
It's a very long answer,
No, that's excellent.
but
Yeah.
I think
Thank you.
this is what we need
The
to do.
audience agrees.
Yes.
Good. So, Matt, still on this topic, I think, in terms of closing the skills gap, Monash University is a, I guess, global university in Indonesia, right? And you can see, I mean, I've also engaged with Monash University before, and you have both, you can see the Indonesian talents or Indonesian students interacting with some of your global students as well, for example. How do you see like the role of maybe Monash University, but also more broadly like higher education institution in closing this gap, and like what kind of innovation, new approaches that you think can be done to accelerate this?
I think there were several members of the Indonesian government and the Indonesian bureaucracy who conceptualize foreign universities coming to Indonesia as part of a probably the neoliberal capitalist approach, which is that competition will increase quality. And I think my short answer is I don't think that's true. My longer answer is that I think foreign universities coming to Indonesia can have an impact through collaboration. Collaboration and impact must be the focus of foreign universities who come to Indonesia, because I don't think that private nor public universities are looking to us and thinking, oh, there are new kids on the block, I now need to raise my standards. I just don't think that that's how human nature works. But I do think that we have a role in collaborating. I do want to return to this issue of the talent drain. And again, I'm going to preface this by saying I am the person, I'm here, I'm Australian, I've been here for a year. Never in my 30 years have I been in charge of a workforce that is quite as skilled and talented as the one I have at Monash, Indonesia. Why is that? Because I've had the Indonesian diaspora return home from Cambridge, Oxford, Imperial, Carnegie Mellon, Utrecht. These are high quality staff. Why have they returned home? They've returned home because, yes, they wanted to work for a top 50 university, but Monash University allowed them, on the basis of their CV, to be appointed at assistant professor, associate professor, or full professor based on their achievements, based on their impact as an academic, and based on a competitive process. Coming back home to a public university would have put them at the very bottom and needing to work their way up over time in a points-based system, which I've suggested privately, and I'll be bold enough to do it here publicly. A points-based system, I believe, gamifies academia in a way that is unbecoming, but also is unproductive for the nation. A focus on quality rather than quantity is absolutely required in policy terms to improve Indonesian universities. We can all say what we will about global league tables, but quality publications, quality research and impact drive the world tables, Times Higher Education, QS, etc. And a focus on quality and a promotion system that doesn't gamify academia through the collection of points, I think will assist in universities in Indonesia being ranked much higher and providing an opportunity for that fantastic Indonesian diaspora to come back home and make a contribution. Because I do want to go back to something I said earlier, which is that higher education has a workforce in and of itself that needs to be nurtured for the good of the nation. And I think a focus on quality and a focus on bringing academics back home, as we have done, and we've done it deliberately, yes, but we've done it because our systems and our process allow us to do so. This focus on the bringing Indonesians home of really high quality and then collaborating with local universities to co-design and co-deliver programs, that's the great impact I see of foreign universities being established here. I don't think it's a competition that is going to drive quality.
No, excellent point. I think this meta awareness of like workforce that will be teaching the workforce is so important. Thank you for highlighting that. My one final question to Matt before we go with closing statements from all speakers, I think is, how do you see higher education institutions need to balance between the soft skills and the kind of more technical skills that are related to the changing sectors? Because I think I was reading this article some time ago, but in this we are entering an over-generalist world where everyone can be a good generalist. We can know a little bit of almost everything thanks to AI, thanks to, just like with AI mainly, right? And therefore, there will be a need for like specialization, actually, even more so as we move forward. And the universities, of course, play an important role there. But at the same time, there's these fundamental skills that Bu Arini earlier highlighted in terms of soft skills. So how do you see, like, how can really university optimally balance these two?
I think this is one of the existential crises of universities, unfortunately, is that a lot of industries tell us that they want us to develop critical thinking, problem solving, and universities can very quickly respond to that and become, as you said, providers of generalist knowledge, generalist skills. The permeability that I talked about earlier and the connection of industry, I think, is the key to unlocking the technical skills. Universities are deliberative bodies. They are very slow. We don't love, but we certainly relish bureaucracy through committees. And I think Dikti and the ministry share similar philosophies, as do governments worldwide, on bureaucracy and wanting to just slow down. So that doesn't make us really responsive to some of those technical skills that are required right now. And so I think universities need to continue to focus on the soft skills, have that as the foundation, then make themselves permeable enough, reduce the bureaucracy so that they can do what Dave was suggesting about moving to a skill-based training far quicker and be far more responsive. So I think that would be my answer to the question, is keep the foundation of the soft skills and then be far quicker and far more responsive. And I think the permeability will absolutely help with that.
I couldn't agree more. Okay, so now I would like to ask one final closing statement, basically from each speaker for maybe just 1 minute. And I think maybe the prompt would be if there is one thing that you can fix, let's say you're the minister tomorrow of education or higher education or whichever minister you want to pick, but what would be your one main priority program that you think should be addressed first in order to have like that multiplier effect to address everything that we talked about? Do you want to go first, Bu Arini?
Okay, if I had that kind of capacity, I would probably push for retraining all faculty, teaching faculty. Because teaching faculty, all levels, from early education to higher education, they're the spearhead. The effect and the scalability that they can get and the impact is much higher than we address each and every students that we have. Because right now, we have this great challenge ahead of us, and we cannot rely on government alone to address this issue. So we really hope, I really hope, that private sectors as well as government can focus on empowering and retraining all teaching faculty. So we hope that each industry, of course, we realize the inequality in terms of quality throughout Indonesia. So at least whatever that they're teaching, whether in Maumere or in Jakarta or in Medan, it's applicable to the industry in the region. And by doing so, the economy will move forward and progress forward. So that's first and foremost teaching faculty improvement.
Teaching faculty. Dave?
So I would say that, look, LinkedIn research is clear on this, that the labor market is changing rapidly. And unfortunately, the systems and infrastructure to support the labor market aren't really designed to cope with the rate of change and the dynamism we're seeing in the labor market today. And so what I think it's going to take to address some of these challenges of sort of future-proofing the workforce and making sure that skills gaps are closed is the close collaboration between academia, industry, and policymakers. So I'm actually going to up-level to the president and say, all of you ministries who have a hand in this, you all have to work together and make this work. And if there are any policymakers out there, I just will say that LinkedIn is committed to partnering with policymakers around the world, but definitely here in Indonesia, to share what we can on labor market insights and skills gaps we see and other information that might be helpful.
That's a great question. Answer.
Well, I'm continuing Ibu Arini's ambition to retrain the faculty of the teaching faculty, and give them the basis for developing mindset that we cannot prepare children, we cannot prepare our young people to be able to compete and participate at the global level overnight. And to build talent who are able to compete in the global level need skills and competencies. While skill can be learned as adults, like what Dave has mentioned a lot, but core competencies need to be nurtured as early as possible. And that should be the basis of the retraining the teaching faculty at the at the teaching university.
Thank you. Matt?
I'm assuming not only that I'm the minister, but also, I'm also not subject to any budget efficiency. So I'm putting a fund in place that I'm then going to work with 10 countries around the world and their best universities to put in place 100 programs that are going to educate 100 current Indonesian academics to get a PhD. So that's going to be 10,000 Indonesian academics in 3.5 years are going to have a PhD by having these collaborations worldwide with universities. Because if there's, I've been here for a year, and if there's ever a country that has ambitions